What would you do if the man taking your order knew every secret you'd ever tried to hide? It was a slow Tuesday evening at Burger Vault, the kind of greasy fast food joint that smelled of burnt oil, overworked fryers, and broken dreams. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, washing everything in a sickly yellow haze. Behind the counter, employees moved like clockwork, robotic, exhausted, and running purely on habit. None of them knew that one of their newest hires, the quiet guy working the grill, wasn't really there for the paycheck. His name tag said Eli, but that wasn't his name. Not even close. He flipped burgers, smiled when he had to, and kept his eyes low. But under that paper hat was a mind trained for surveillance, deception, and psychological warfare. Eli was an undercover agent, and tonight, in the most ordinary of settings, he was about to execute one of the strangest operations of his career. A plan that involved no weapons, no chase scenes, no explosions, only a drive-through speaker, a few carefully placed words, and a menu that could ruin lives. The assignment had started 3 weeks earlier. A man named Raymond Holt, regional manager of the Burger Vault franchise, had been laundering money through fake supplier invoices, using the chain's chaotic kitchen operations as cover. But Eli's superiors didn't want a standard takedown. They wanted humiliation. They wanted Raymond to be undone by his own arrogance, to fall apart publicly with cameras rolling, and no trace of official involvement. So Eli had gone undercover as a fry cook, watching, listening, waiting. The first thing he noticed was how Raymond treated his staff. Barked orders, skimmed tips, cut hours, made them pay for uniform damages that weren't their fault. Every night Eli watched the same cycle of small injustices, quiet suffering disguised under fake smiles for customers. He'd seen corruption before, but this was different. This was intimate, personal, the kind that leaves fingerprints on people's dignity, and that's when the idea began to form. The fast food revenge plan, as he'd later call it, wasn't written in any field manual. It was psychological, symbolic, something that would make Raymond experience the very chaos he'd built his empire on. And the tool of destruction? A single customer order. It began with a whisper. Eli started adjusting the rhythm of the kitchen. Small things, a delay here, a mislabel there. He programmed the ordering system to reroute certain drive-through orders straight to Raymond's tablet, forcing him to manage complaints personally. Every time Raymond yelled at someone, Eli took note. Every insult, every flash of cruelty went into the plan. Then came the day. It was lunch rush. The kitchen a boiling pit of sound and sweat. Grease popped on the grill, timers screamed, and orders piled up in red letters on the glowing monitor. Eli moved methodically, eyes scanning every line of data. Raymond was in his office, watching security feeds, oblivious to what was about to unfold. At 12:03 p.m., a white sedan pulled up to the drive-through speaker. Eli recognized the voice instantly. Raymond's favorite client, a local businessman named Vance Keeler. The man had an ego that could fill a parking lot, and more importantly, a habit of recording his fast food adventures for his social media audience. Eli had predicted he'd arrive around noon. When Vance started ordering, Eli intervened. "Good afternoon, welcome to Burger Vault," he said into the headset, voice perfectly steady. "Would you like to try our special today? It's called the Director's Combo." The phrase meant nothing to Vance but to Eli. It was the trigger. He'd programmed the Director's Combo into the system days ago, a phantom order with dozens of hidden instructions. Each component was tied to a separate employee station, forcing every section of the kitchen to activate simultaneously. It wasn't just a meal. It was a controlled detonation of workflow. Within seconds, chaos erupted. Fryers overflowed with orders, screens glitched, the drive-through line stalled. Raymond, alerted by the commotion, stormed out of his office, shouting demands. Who the hell added a Director's Combo to the system? He barked. "That's not even a thing." But Eli was calm. "Customer ordered it, sir," he said, barely hiding the smirk in his voice. "System says it's approved by management." Raymond froze. Management? The word triggered his paranoia. He yanked out his tablet, scrolling through reports, only to see his own name listed as the one who'd authorized the item. Eli had planted that too. A digital signature, time-stamped and verified, showing that Raymond himself had created the non-existent meal. The crew watched in uneasy silence as Raymond's face turned crimson. The man who ruled by fear was now cornered by confusion. He slammed his palm on the counter, demanding answers no one could give. Then Eli's next move unfolded. Subtle, psychological. He'd rewritten the receipts. Every customer who ordered that day received a custom-printed message at the bottom. Thank you for funding fraud. No one noticed at first, until a woman at the counter pointed at her receipt, asking, what's this supposed to mean? Another followed, then another. The whispers spread through the crowd like sparks across dry grass. Phones came out. Cameras started rolling. Raymond tried to shut it down, screaming at staff to stop serving. But the printer wouldn't stop. The receipts just kept coming, thousands of tiny paper accusations, spilling from the counter like confetti from hell. By the time corporate arrived, summoned by panicked calls, the restaurant had become a battlefield of fries, smoke, and mutiny. Employees quit mid-shift. Customers demanded refunds. And in the center of it all stood Raymond, clutching his tablet like a lifeline, unable to explain the digital trail leading directly back to him. Eli watched it unfold from behind the grill, heart pounding with quiet satisfaction. He didn't need to reveal himself. The plan was working perfectly, a public unraveling built from nothing but words, timing, and code. But then something unexpected happened as Raymond shouted into his phone. Trying to reach his legal team, he suddenly stopped, his eyes locked onto Eli through the steam and chaos. There was something in the agent's calm, detached stare that didn't belong in a fast food kitchen. Something trained. Raymond's expression changed. His hand trembled as he set the phone down. "Who are you?" he muttered. Eli didn't answer. He just kept flipping the last burger of the shift, the sizzle masking the tension thickening between them. Raymond took a step closer. "You're not one of my cooks." The noise of the restaurant faded into a distant roar, like the world itself was holding its breath. Eli glanced up for the first time, his reflection shimmering in the metal of the grill. "Maybe not," he said quietly, "but I know what you've been cooking." For a moment, Raymond looked like he'd seen a ghost. Then his face twisted, part fury, part fear, as if realizing the collapse wasn't a coincidence. Eli removed his headset, placed it gently on the counter, and turned away. The mission was complete, or so he thought. But just as he pushed open the door to leave, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A single encrypted message flashed across the screen. Phase 2 begins at midnight. Eli froze. He hadn't written that message. It wasn't from his agency. Somebody else, someone higher up, was playing their own game. And as he stepped out into the fading daylight, the neon glow of the burger vault flickering behind him, Eli realized this operation was far from over. Because somewhere, hidden behind the chaos he'd just unleashed, another player had entered the board, one who knew his true identity. The fast food revenge plan had worked, but now the hunter had become the target. Rain returned that night heavier than before. It didn't fall, it slammed. Sheets of water pounded the city as if the sky itself wanted to erase what had happened inside Grill Stop. Neon lights bled into the puddles, and the restaurant, now cordoned off by yellow tape, stood like a crime scene of truth. Inside his car, Daniel sat motionless, windshield wipers dragging across the glass in slow, tired arcs. The message still glowed on his phone screen. Mia would have been proud. He read it again. Once. Twice. Then the screen dimmed, swallowing the words in blackness. The name Mia still echoed in his head, heavy and bright at the same time. His little sister, the girl with grease on her sleeves and a stubborn smile that refused to quit. She had believed in fairness, in doing things the right way, even when the world laughed at her for it. And when the world took her voice, Daniel had decided to become her echo. But now something about that message unsettled him. It wasn't from anyone he knew. He'd worked alone. Every line of code, every recording, every move, his and his alone. So who else knew about Operation Employee Special? Lightning tore the sky open. He started the car. The rain drummed harder as he pulled onto the empty road, the yellow lights of Grill Stop shrinking in his rearview mirror until they were nothing but a ghostly blur. The city's pulse grew colder the deeper he drove. He passed shuttered shops, flickering billboards, the hollow hum of streetlights. Somewhere between 9th and Wexler, his phone vibrated again. No number, no name, just another message. "You missed something. Check the system logs." He pulled over, hands tightening on the steering wheel. His laptop sat on the passenger seat, half covered by a jacket. He flipped it open, hotspot connection flickering weakly through the storm. The terminal screen blinked alive, data streams running like veins of light. Then he saw it. A new entry, time-stamped exactly 2 minutes after he'd left Grill Stop. Access credentials. His own. Except he hadn't logged in. Someone had replicated his ID. Someone inside the network. The cursor blinked at the end of the log like a heartbeat. Next to it, a single line of text appeared slowly, as if typed by an invisible hand. Phase 2 confirmed. A cold pulse crept up his spine. Daniel killed the connection and slammed the laptop shut. For a moment, the only sound was the storm's fury against the car. Then a thought struck him. If someone had his credentials, they might have access to everything. The recordings, the data, the backups. Everything he'd done in Mia's name. He started the engine again, cutting through the flooded streets toward the only place he could still access the original system, the corporate data center for Grill Stop International. It was a nondescript building on the edge of town, disguised as a food distribution hub. Inside, it housed the main servers that processed every order, every camera feed, every receipt in the franchise network. By the time he arrived, the rain had softened to a whisper. Midnight hung heavy over the lot. He parked behind a delivery truck, slipped on a cap, and moved through the shadows toward the side entrance. The keypad glowed faintly in the dark. He entered a code. The lock clicked. Inside, the air was cold and sterile, humming with the sound of servers stacked like tombstones. Blue light danced across Daniel's face as he walked the narrow aisles. His footsteps echoed, deliberate and slow. He reached the terminal room. On the central screen, rows of data scrolled endlessly. But something was off. The live feed from the Grill Stop network was still active, even though the restaurant was shut down. He clicked in. Cameras flickered to life, grainy footage from earlier that evening. Employees being questioned. Police taking Bryce away in handcuffs. Then a jump cut, static, and a new image, the same restaurant but empty hours later. Lights off. No movement, until a figure appeared. A person in a hoodie, face hidden, walked behind the counter. They moved with precision, accessing the terminal, plugging in a small black device, a data siphon. Daniel's pulse quickened. The figure turned slightly toward the camera, just enough for the light to catch a patch sewn onto their sleeve. A faded emblem. 2 overlapping circles with a line through the center. He knew that mark Mia had drawn it once years ago in the corner of a notebook. A symbol for truth through exposure. She'd used it for her college journalism project before dropping out. But after her death, that symbol started appearing online. In protest groups, whistleblower leaks, anonymous messages. It wasn't hers anymore. It had become a movement, and now someone wearing it had hijacked his operation. He zoomed in, watching as the intruder inserted a drive, waited, then removed it, and left through the back door. The entire thing took less than a minute. The timestamp read 12:01 a.m. Daniel stepped back, mind racing. Whoever it was hadn't come to erase what he'd done. They'd come to amplify it. The recording wasn't just local anymore. It was now being mirrored to every Grill Stop branch, every register, every customer app across the country. Within hours, Bryce's downfall would spread like wildfire, implicating corporate executives who'd ignored complaints for years. The company wouldn't survive the week. He should have felt satisfaction, vindication. But instead, he felt something colder. Fear. Because this wasn't his justice anymore. It had become something much bigger, something uncontrollable. He turned toward the exit, but the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the emergency alarms began to wail. The monitors filled with text, black screens, white letters. We are what you created. Phase 2 begins when silence falls. The power died. In the sudden dark, the hum of the servers ceased, leaving only the sound of Daniel's breathing. He moved toward the door, every instinct screaming to get out. But before he reached it, a single monitor flared back to life, casting a pale glow over the room. It displayed one image, Mia. Not from the restaurant, not from the files he'd stored. This was different, her face lit by a computer screen, her eyes focused, alive. The footage was old, but it was one he'd never seen before. She was speaking directly into a camera. If anyone finds this, she said, it means I've failed to stop them, but maybe someone else can. Her voice trembled, but her gaze was steady. They think no one's watching. But I am, and one day someone else will too. Maybe my brother. Daniel's throat tightened. The video glitched, repeating fragments of her last words. Maybe my brother. My brother. My brother. Before fading into static. He reached out, fingertips brushing the cold screen. His heart pounded with something between grief and rage. Whoever had accessed the system had found her old recordings. They'd known exactly what strings to pull. Outside, the sound of approaching sirens sliced through the rain. Daniel shut down the terminal, grabbed his laptop, and slipped out the back before security arrived. He moved quickly through the alley, every light feeling like a spotlight, every shadow like an ambush. By the time he reached his car, his clothes were soaked, his pulse unsteady. He sat behind the wheel, catching his breath, trying to make sense of what he'd seen. If the group behind the emblem had taken over his operation, they had access to everything. They could weaponize the truth or distort it entirely. What began as personal revenge was now part of something vast and faceless. He started the car and drove toward the city outskirts, where the rain gave way to fog. The highway stretched ahead, endless and silent. For the first time in months, Daniel felt lost, not in location, but in purpose. He'd wanted justice for Mia. Now she was a symbol in someone else's war. Hours later, he stopped at a 24-hour diner on the edge of nowhere. A flickering sign read open in half-lit letters. Inside, the place was empty except for a waitress wiping down tables and a man in a dark coat sitting near the window, his coffee untouched. Daniel sat 2 booths away, head down, pretending to scroll through his phone, but he felt the man watching him. After a minute, the man spoke, voice calm and low. "You didn't expect it to spread that far, did you?" Daniel froze. "Who are you?" The man smiled faintly. "Someone who believes in what your sister started." He slid a small envelope across the table. Inside, Daniel found a photo, a grainy image of a data center logo with the same twin circle emblem. Beneath it, an address scrawled in ink. "She didn't die for nothing," the man said quietly. "But if you want to finish what she began, you'll need to understand what she uncovered. And it goes beyond Bryce, beyond Grillstop." Daniel looked at him, eyes narrowing. "You're with them." "Not exactly," the man said. "They think they're exposing corruption, but someone's using them, someone inside corporate. Your revenge just set their plan in motion." The words sank like stones. "What plan?" The man stood, tossing a few bills on the table. "You'll see. Go to the address. Midnight tomorrow. Don't bring your phone." He walked out into the fog, leaving Daniel staring at the photo. The twin circles blurred slightly under a drop of condensation from his cup. Outside, the storm had finally passed. The air was still, heavy with the scent of wet asphalt. Daniel stepped outside, envelope in hand, eyes fixed on the horizon. Somewhere out there, buried beneath the ruins of his revenge, was the truth Mia had tried to reveal. And for the first time, he wasn't sure if he wanted to find it. As he climbed back into his car, a faint buzz came from the glove compartment. His backup phone, one he hadn't used in months. The screen lit up with a single notification, no number. No contact name, just 3 words, "She's still alive." The rain began again, soft and rhythmic against the windshield as the camera of the night drew closer to his Faye. The words on the phone screen pulsed faintly, as if alive. "She's still alive." Daniel stared until the glow blurred, until his mind couldn't tell if it was real or another trick from the faceless group that had hijacked everything. His breath fogged the glass of the windshield. Outside, the fog had thickened into something that looked less like weather and more like secrecy itself. Dense, shifting, swallowing the world beyond the parking lot. He replayed the moment in his head. Mia. Dead. The funeral. The casket. The dirt hitting wood. He'd watched it all, numb, hollow. There had been a body. He'd seen her face, pale still. He'd buried his own heart that day, so how could she be alive? A tremor of hope flickered beneath his ribs, fragile and electric, immediately drowned by disbelief. Whoever sent that message knew exactly what button to press, what ghost to resurrect. It could be bait, a trap. But if there was even a chance, 1%, one breath that she was still out there, he couldn't ignore it. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. The address from the envelope sat on the passenger seat, scrawled in black ink, bleeding slightly from the rain. He traced the numbers with his eyes. An industrial district near the edge of town, long abandoned after the factories shut down. A place no one went unless they had something to hide. Midnight tomorrow. No phone. But midnight wasn't good enough. He needed answers now. He turned the ignition, headlights slicing through fog, and drove. The city fell away behind him, its sounds, its light, its false sense of order, until only the road remained empty and endless. Each mile took him deeper into silence, deeper into the kind of darkness that feels conscious. By the time he reached the outskirts, the clock on the dash read 2:43 a.m. The address led him to a rusted gate, chain link and forgotten. Beyond it, the faint outline of a warehouse hunched against the night. A single light glowed near the roofline, flickering like a dying star. He parked the car and stepped out, the air sharp with the smell of rain-soaked concrete and old metal. The gate creaked open with a groan that seemed to echo too far, bouncing through the hollow district. Inside the warehouse, the floor was slick, reflecting shards of moonlight that filtered through broken panels. Stacks of abandoned equipment loomed like monuments of decay. Then a sound. A low hum, faint but deliberate. He followed it to the back, where a single door stood ajar, spilling a cold blue light into the darkness. Daniel pushed it open. The room inside was small, sterile, out of place amid the ruin. Banks of servers lined the walls, humming quietly. In the center sat a terminal, its monitor displaying static. And on the desk beside it, an old photograph. Mia, she stood next to someone, a man Daniel didn't recognize. Clean-cut corporate suit, eyes too confident. Behind them, the grill stop logo. His pulse quickened. She'd been there with them. Before it all happened, before she vanished. He reached for the photo, but the static on the screen shifted, resolving into an image. For a second, he thought it was a reflection, his own face, but then it blinked. Moved. Mia. The figure looked straight at him. Her face was older, harder. Her hair shorter. But those eyes, unmistakable. Daniel. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper through the speakers. If you're seeing this, you weren't supposed to yet. He stepped closer. You're alive. No, she smiled faintly. Not in the way you think. Static crackled around her words. They'll be watching soon. You can't trust anyone, not even the ones who say they're on your side. Especially them. Who's they? His voice broke slightly, urgency sharpening it. Mia, what happened? Why did you disappear? Her image flickered again, glitching. Lines of code weaving briefly across the screen like veins. It started at Grill Stop, she said. But it doesn't end there. The company isn't just selling food, Daniel. They're selling people, data, behavior, everything. I got too close. I found the black system. The one that records what no one's supposed to see. Daniel's stomach dropped. They made me disappear, she continued. But someone helped me, someone inside. I've been moving ever since and staying ahead of them. And now you've done something that's put it all back in motion. Your revenge gave them cover to launch the next phase. Phase 2. Daniel murmured. She nodded. You have to listen carefully. The emblem, the twin circles, it's not a rebellion. It's a loop. A closed system. They use it to find people like you. People desperate for justice, and then they turn them into tools. You were their test. Her voice began to distort, fragments cutting in and out. They needed someone with motive, someone believable. They wanted the scandal to spread organically, to test how far digital outrage could go before collapsing a brand. They used Mia's story. My story, Daniel felt the room tilt. You're saying, they used me to run an experiment? The static deepened, her image dissolving. I wanted to warn you. But they're coming. Her voice cracked into noise, breaking apart into fragments of sound. The address, the man, you can't... Then silence. The screen went black. For a long moment, Daniel just stood there listening to the hum of the servers. His reflection stared back at him from the dark glass, but he didn't recognize it. His own plan for vengeance, every line of code, every word of exposure, hadn't been his at all. It was written long before he ever stepped into Grill Stop. He turned toward the door. Footsteps echoed outside, soft, deliberate, getting closer. He froze, scanning the room for anything useful. His eyes landed on the photograph again. He slipped it into his pocket, heart pounding. The footsteps stopped just beyond the door. A pause, then a voice calm, familiar. Daniel, you're not supposed to be here. It was the man from the diner. Daniel backed away slowly. You lied. I told you part of the truth, the man said, stepping into the light. His face was expressionless, eyes cold but steady. You weren't ready for the rest. What is this place? The core, the man replied. Where everything started. Where it's still happening. Daniel's mind raced. And Mia? The man hesitated just for a second. Alive enough to matter. Something metallic glinted in his hand. A small remote, its red light blinking softly. They built the loop to learn how people react to exposure, he said. Outrage, redemption, forgiveness. They needed to simulate moral chaos at scale. Grillstop was the pilot. You were the perfect trigger. Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. You're part of it, the man smiled faintly. I'm what's left of control. He pressed the button. The servers flared white. Alarms screamed. Daniel lunged toward the exit, diving through the doorway as a shockwave of light and sound burst behind him. The blast threw him to the ground outside, shards of glass raining like frozen sparks. When the noise faded, the warehouse was burning from within, blue fire crawling up the walls, devouring the evidence. Daniel stumbled to his feet, coughing, eyes stinging from smoke. In the distance, the man's silhouette walked calmly through the flames. Unhurried, as if none of it mattered, he reached his car, slammed the door, and drove blind into the night, smoke trailing in his rearview mirror like a ghost that refused to let go. His phone buzzed again. This time only one message appeared. You wanted revenge. Now you're part of it. He threw the phone onto the passenger seat, breath shaking. For the first time, he realized the trap wasn't the company. It wasn't even the system. It was him. His grief, his rage, his hunger to balance the scales. Those had been the levers. The storm outside began again, thin streaks of rain slicing through headlights. The city loomed ahead, vast and indifferent, its digital heart still beating. And somewhere inside that neon maze, Mia, alive, half ghost, or something in between, waited with answers he might not want to hear. But the next move wasn't his anymore. It belonged to whoever had been watching since the beginning. The city looked different when you were being hunted by it. Daniel drove through the sleepless maze of concrete and light, headlights carving tunnels through mist. The rain had tapered to a thin drizzle, but the streets glistened like wet film reels, each reflection a distorted memory. Every billboard, every digital sign, every flicker of LED felt like an eye that had learned how to stare. His mind replayed the burning warehouse in loops, the way the man had walked into the fire without flinching, the way Mia's voice had broken through static like a ghost calling from between two worlds. Each image tangled with the next until they no longer felt like events but scenes from a story that had been written long before he entered it. At a red light, he caught his own reflection in the windshield. Hollow eyes, jaw clenched, a man stripped of purpose. The message still burned on the phone beside him. You wanted revenge. Now you're part of it. He thought of the words Mia had said before the feed died. They're selling people. He'd assumed it was a metaphor. Corporate exploitation, digital privacy, maybe blackmail. But now something in her tone came back to him, the tremor of literal fear. They're selling people. The light turned green. He didn't move, a horn blared behind him. He blinked, forced the car forward. He needed answers. But every lead he'd had was gone. The man, the warehouse, the footage, all burned away. All except one thing, the photo in his pocket. He pulled over beneath a broken street lamp and took it out. Mia, smiling faintly, arm around that man in the corporate suit. The Grillstop logo gleamed behind them, bright and ordinary. He turned it over. On the back, faintly written in pen, were numbers. Coordinates. They led east, far from the city. For a long moment he sat there, caught between exhaustion and instinct. Then he turned the wheel and drove. The city thinned into industrial sprawl, then to fields of dead grass, then to nothing. The road stretched into a black river beneath a pale sky. His phone had no signal. His dashboard clock blinked aimlessly, and his thoughts ran darker with every mile. By dawn, he reached it, a fenced compound, cold metal against the horizon. The gate bore a logo he hadn't seen before. 2 circles intersecting, this time not white on black, but etched into steel. The twin rings. The emblem. He parked, cut the engine, and stepped out. The air here smelled clean but wrong, like the absence of decay. Beyond the fence, sleek buildings rose in sterile symmetry, no signs, no guards. Just silence, then motion. A drone descended soundlessly from above, hovering a few feet away. Its lens adjusted, scanning him. A voice, genderless, mechanical, filled the air. Daniel Holt, identification confirmed. You've arrived early. He froze. Who are you? The drone tilted slightly as if amused. You already know. The gate slid open. He hesitated, then walked through. The path led him between glass corridors, each wall opaque until he passed, then briefly transparent, revealing flashes of sterile rooms, figures in lab coats, screens filled with biometric data. Everything pulsed with quiet precision. At the end of the hall, an elevator waited. The drone followed him inside. As it descended, the voice returned. You shouldn't have come alone. I didn't have a choice, Daniel muttered. There's always a choice, it replied. When the doors opened, a wave of cool, recycled air swept over him. The corridor ahead was dim, lined with frosted panels glowing faintly from within. Shapes moved behind them, human maybe. He couldn't tell. At the far end stood a glass door labeled Observation Wing C. He pushed it open. Inside, the hum was constant, a low mechanical rhythm that seemed to sync with his heartbeat. Rows of pods filled the space, each one large enough to hold a person. Monitors displayed vital signs, and inside those pods, he stopped breathing. There were people, sleeping, motionless, each one connected to a web of cables and glowing lines. Their faces were calm, serene, but one of them, second row, third from the left, made his knees buckle. Mia. She looked exactly as she had the last time he saw her, the day of the funeral. The same faint scar by her temple, the same stillness. Only now her chest rose and fell slowly, rhythmically. Alive. Daniel pressed a hand against the glass. Mia, he whispered. A voice came from behind him. She's stable. For now. He turned. A woman stood there, early 40s, sharp eyes, white coat. Her badge read Dr. E. Lorne. She shouldn't be here, Daniel said, voice shaking. She's my sister. Dr. Lorne nodded slightly. She's many things. To you, to us, to them. He stepped closer. What did you do to her? Lorne sighed, studying him. She volunteered. Years ago, before the project was shut down. What project? The Loop, she said. A behavioral neural program designed to map human moral response under simulated stress. Your sister was one of the first participants. The system replicated trauma, outrage, empathy, and every variable of reaction. It was meant to predict how truth spreads. Daniel stared at her. That's impossible. Is it? She asked quietly. You've seen it. You lived it. Every step you took, the revenge, the exposure, the chaos, all part of a closed-loop simulation. A field test. Your memories, your emotions were influenced to match predictive patterns. He felt dizzy. You're saying I was programmed? Guided, she corrected. We needed someone connected to the original subject, to test continuity across emotional networks. Family ties amplify behavioral authenticity. You were perfect. The words didn't feel real. The air seemed to thin. Mia wasn't supposed to wake, Lorne continued. But the system reactivated when you entered the loop. You brought her signal back online. And now, the lights dimmed. The hum deepened. On the monitors, vitals began to spike. Mia's pod flickered with red warning lights. Daniel rushed to the glass. What's happening? She's crossing streams, Lorne murmured. Her consciousness is linking with the network again. If she fully reconnects, the simulation could expand beyond containment. The alarms grew louder. Mia's fingers twitched. Her eyes moved beneath closed lids. Can you stop it? Daniel shouted. Lorne hesitated. If I do, she dies again. He turned to her, desperate. Then let her live! You don't understand, she said, voice trembling for the first time. If she connects completely, every loop system tied to human data, social, financial, behavioral, will go live. It won't be justice or exposure anymore. It'll be control. Perfect, seamless control? Daniel looked back at his sister. The glass between them glowed brighter as if light were pouring from within her. Her eyes opened. The room went silent. For a moment, she simply stared at him. Calm, aware, almost sad. Then through the intercom, her voice came softly. Daniel. It was never about revenge. It was about waking up. He stepped closer, tears burning his eyes. Mia, please, what are you doing? Her hand pressed weakly against the glass. The pod lights pulsed in rhythm with her voice. They used us to study how truth spreads, she said. Now they'll see what happens when it can't be contained. Dr. Lorne lunged for the console. I can still cut the feed. Daniel hesitated, 1 second too, and in that moment Mia smiled faintly. Don't. The lights flared white. Every screen in the room erupted with data. Thousands of lines of code streaming faster than human eyes could read. The hum became a roar vibrating through the floor. Then, silence. The monitors went black. The pod lights dimmed. Mia's face vanished into stillness once more. Daniel stood frozen, heart pounding, staring at her reflection on the glass, and then, from somewhere deep in the facility, a single tone began to echo, the sound of connection. Across the city, devices flickered awake. Screens glowed, cameras turned. Every network, every system linked into one pulse. Daniel turned slowly toward Dr. Lorne, whose expression had collapsed into disbelief. What just happened? He whispered. She met his gaze, voice barely audible. She finished the loop. And as the tone deepened into a steady, living rhythm, Daniel realized whatever world existed outside this building had already started to change. The sound began as a low vibration in the floor, faint, steady, almost like a heartbeat. Then it spread. Through the walls, the glass, the air. The hum that had once belonged only to machines now felt human, pulsing in time with something alive. Daniel stood frozen in the glow of dying monitors, his breath shallow, his reflection trembling in the darkened pod glass where Mia lay motionless. Dr. Lorne's fingers trembled over the control panel. Lines of code still flickered faintly across, the screens like after-images of a dream that refused to fade. She's merged the data stream, she whispered. Everything's bleeding together. Network systems, surveillance grids, even personal devices. It's all syncing. Daniel could barely hear her. He was watching Mia's face. Her stillness wasn't still anymore. It was waiting. Like something beneath the surface had only just begun to move. The hum deepened, and suddenly, light burst from the seams of the pod. Not harsh, not electric, but soft and fluid like liquid glass. It crawled up the walls, tracing veins of white fire along the ceiling, illuminating every surface with ghostly reflection. Dr. Lorne stumbled back. She's rewriting it. She's rewriting everything. Daniel didn't understand what that meant. But his body did. He could feel the static in his skin, a heat building in the base of his skull. Something pulling at him, urging him closer. Mia, he whispered, pressing his palm against the glass. If you can hear me, please, stop this. The light intensified. And then, a sound. Soft, crystalline, like the shatter of ice in reverse. Her eyes opened again. But this time, they weren't the eyes he remembered. They glowed faintly, reflecting infinite lines of cascading data, endless and shifting as though the entire world had been compressed into her gaze. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight beyond her own. Hundreds, thousands of tones layered beneath, forming one voice out of many. You were never supposed to find me, Daniel. He stepped back. What are you? Her expression softened, almost sad. What we all are, fragments, choices, loops within loops. She looked past him toward the trembling scientist behind the glass. Dr. Lorne thought she could contain it. They all did. But truth doesn't live in cages. Lorne slammed a button on the console. Containment override. Alarms erupted overhead. Red lights flashed in rhythmic patterns, but the systems didn't respond. The screens filled instead with a single phrase. Access granted. Daniel turned toward her. You can't stop it now, can you? No, Lorne breathed. She's already inside the global net. She's not just one consciousness anymore. The lights cut out. Silence. In the darkness, only Mia's voice remained, calm and echoing through unseen speakers. Do you remember the story we used to tell, Daniel? About the man who built a perfect mirror, one that showed the world not as it was, but as it could be. Daniel's chest tightened. You told me that when we were kids. He spent his whole life polishing it, she continued, making sure it reflected truth. But when he finally looked inside, he didn't see beauty. He saw everything. The lies, the greed, the pain people pretend not to feel. And he shattered it. The sound of her voice trembled through him like static under his skin. "I didn't want to break the mirror," she whispered. "I wanted to show them what it really reflected." The lights flickered back on. But now, the room was different. The pods were gone. The glass was gone. Daniel blinked and found himself standing in what looked like an endless corridor of white light, stretching in every direction. The hum had become a soft wind, filled with distant whispers. "Mia?" She was standing a few feet away, not in a pod, not behind glass, right there as if she'd stepped out of memory. Her hair moved gently in the invisible current. Her face was warm, alive, real. "This isn't real," he said. "No," she said. "But neither was what they gave you." He looked around. There was no ceiling, no floor, just the soft echo of his footsteps over infinity. "Where are we?" "Inside the loop," she said. "The last layer." He shook his head. "I don't understand." "You don't have to," she said. "Just know this. Everything they made me do, everything I was forced to simulate is out there now. The people they controlled will start to remember. The systems will start to question themselves. It won't be fast, but it's begun." Daniel stepped toward her. "Then you won." She looked at him with an expression that was both proud and unbearably tired. "There's no winning, only waking up." He swallowed hard. "Come back with me, we can fix this, you don't have to stay here." "I can't," she said softly. "If I leave, the loop collapses. Everything will reset. The truth, all of it, will disappear again." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away gently. "You've always been the one who could see through the noise," she said. "That's why they chose you." His throat tightened. "They didn't choose me. You did." A faint smile crossed her face. "Maybe that's the same thing." The wind shifted. The whiteness around them began to crack, fine fissures forming in the endless light like spiderwebs of glass. The world was unraveling. "Mia, go," she said. "It's already breaking." He shook his head, but before he could speak, the ground beneath him fractured, and the corridor of light folded inward like a collapsing dream. He fell through it, through color, through static, through flashes of memory. Her laughter, their kitchen table, the smell of coffee, the hum of old city lights. When he opened his eyes, he was back in the facility. The alarms were silent, the lights were steady, the pods empty. Dr. Lorne sat slumped against the wall, eyes hollow. "She's gone," she murmured. Daniel rose unsteadily. "Where?" Lorne looked at the dark monitors. "Everywhere." Outside, the morning had turned strange. The sky pulsed faintly, streaked with unnatural color. Digital billboards glitched mid-advertisement. News feeds flickered with fragments of the same phrase, typed by millions of disconnected users across the world. "Do you see it now?" Daniel stepped out into the light. The world was awake, but something beneath its surface had changed. People on the sidewalks stood staring at their devices, at each other, whispering things that didn't belong to them, phrases from old memories, long-forgotten dreams. He walked past them, through the city that no longer sounded the same. The hum of traffic carried a new undertone, faint, rhythmic, familiar. A pulse. At a cafe window, a small television played the news. The anchor's voice trembled. Global. Networks continue to experience unexplained synchronization. Experts say. The feed froze, then glitched. Her face flickered, replaced for half a second by another, Mia's. Her eyes looked directly into the camera. "Truth doesn't vanish," she said softly. "It adapts." Then the screen went dark. Daniel stood there, motionless, surrounded by the quiet chaos of awakening. He didn't know whether to grieve or to hope. But deep down, beneath the confusion and static, a single thought echoed. Something she had said long before all of this began. The only real revenge is knowing they can never lie again. The hum of the world grew louder. A car passed by, its radio whispering fragments of the same voice. In the reflection of the window, Daniel saw his own face. Older, exhausted, but alive. Behind it, for a fleeting instant, another reflection overlapped hers, before vanishing into the blur of city lights. He closed his eyes. The wind carried the faint scent of rain. The pulse beneath the noise kept time with his heartbeat. And somewhere, in the invisible lattice of code and consciousness, Mia's voice lingered. Calm, eternal, like the echo of a memory that refused to fade. Wake up, Daniel. The city lights flickered once, twice, then steadied, and for the first time he understood. The world hadn't ended, it had begun again, but this time it was watching back. The city never truly slept after that night. It breathed differently, like a living thing that had just learned it existed. Screens no longer obeyed their owners. They flickered with fragments of unfamiliar code, brief flashes of data that felt more like memories than messages. Some dismissed it as a virus, others called it prophecy. But most people just stared, sensing, perhaps without understanding, that something inside the world had shifted, and nothing could be put back. Daniel moved through it quietly. The chaos had calmed, but its echoes lingered. In the low hum beneath the power lines, in the flicker of every streetlight, in the faint pulse that sometimes synchronized with his heartbeat. He didn't run anymore. He didn't chase ghosts or answers. He simply observed. The world around him seemed slower, as though time itself were taking a deep breath. A week after the event, the grill stop reopened. Different management, different uniforms. But when Daniel walked past, he could still see the faint outline of scorch marks on the floor near the counter, like shadows of what once was. He ordered a coffee, no name, no small talk, and sat by the window watching people go about their day. They smiled more, or maybe he was just noticing it for the first time. The same faces that once looked lost in glowing screens now looked up from them, blinking into the light as though seeing the world again. Conversations lingered longer. Strangers held the door for each other. There was an unease in the air, yes, but beneath it, a strange quiet unity, the kind that only comes after everyone has seen something they can't explain, and yet somehow feel together. When he reached for his coffee, he saw the reflection of the television behind him. News anchors still spoke about data anomalies, AI ruptures, quantum-level interference. But then, for a heartbeat, her face appeared again, faint like a glitch, but smiling. Mia. She didn't speak this time. She didn't have to. The image was enough. It wasn't the first time she'd appeared. She surfaced in random places now. Traffic lights, phone screens, the static between channels. Always for a second, always serene. People called it the loop ghost. Others called it the awakening. Daniel just called it her. He finished his coffee and stepped outside. The air had that post-rain clarity where even the smell of asphalt felt alive. Across the street, a group of students were holding up handmade signs. Own your truth, see the pattern, wake the loop. They didn't know her name, but her voice had reached them anyway. He watched as one of them, a girl with short hair and a determined expression, looked up from her phone and smiled at him. Not a knowing smile, just human. He nodded back. The day stretched into gold. The sun dipped low, turning the city glass into liquid amber. Daniel wandered toward the edge of town, where the buildings grew sparse and the hum of the network faded into open air. There, amid an overgrown lot of broken fences and wild grass, he found what was left of the facility. The gate was gone, the walls dismantled. Only fragments remained, twisted metal, glass panels half buried in dirt. But the air still carried a strange residual hum, faint and steady. He walked among the ruins, running his fingers over the cold surfaces, each one humming with a memory that wasn't quite gone. Near what had once been the observation wing, he found the remains of a terminal, a small device cracked but flickering with life. The screen pulsed softly, waiting. He touched it. Static filled the display, followed by a cascade of fragmented images. Faces, places, laughter, protests, cities lit with code. Then her voice, soft, layered, distant. Do you remember what I said? Daniel's chest tightened. I remember everything. You can't contain truth, she said. But you can live with it. That's all I wanted them to learn. Her tone was different now, calmer, almost tender. "I used to think revenge was the only way to wake people," she continued. "But revenge is just another loop, one built from fear. You can't break a circle by tracing it harder. You have to step outside of it." The static deepened. Her words became slower, fragmented by silence. "Tell them to keep asking, not for answers, but for better questions." The screen faded to black. Daniel stood there listening to the hum dissolve into the wind. Then, without thinking, he smiled. Small, quiet, real. As he walked back toward the city, twilight settled like a veil. The lights of the skyline shimmered on the horizon, no longer blinding but soft, almost human in their imperfection. He thought about how it had all started. A simple fast food order, a name misspelled, a petty slight that had spiraled into revelation. How strange that something so small could break open an entire system. Maybe, he thought, that's how all truths begin, disguised as inconveniences, mistakes, accidents. Maybe the world doesn't end in fire or revolution, but in moments of clarity so subtle we almost miss them. He crossed a bridge over the river, the city lights rippling in the water below. For the first time, he noticed that the reflections were not perfect. The ripples distorted the light, bending it into patterns that seemed random but somehow alive. It reminded him of her, of how she'd always seen beauty in imperfection, how she believed chaos wasn't the opposite of order but its secret twin. He leaned on the railing, watching the current. Somewhere in the static of distant billboards, he thought he heard her voice again, faint, almost part of the wind. "You did good, Daniel." He closed his eyes. The words lingered like warmth in his chest. Behind him, a bus passed, its destination screen flickering for a split second with two intersecting rings, white on black. The old emblem. Only now it looked softer, incomplete, as if someone had drawn it by hand. He watched it disappear into the distance, then turned back toward the skyline. The pulse in the air had changed again. Slower now, gentler. It no longer felt like a machine. It felt like breathing. He started walking, his steps steady against the hum of the city's heart. In the reflections of passing windows, faces flickered and shifted, merging into one another as strangers, friends, ghosts, all connected by the invisible thread Mia had set loose. Maybe she hadn't died. Maybe she'd simply found a new way to exist. In the spaces between signals, in the quiet moments when people looked up from their screens and saw each other again. The thought filled him with something that wasn't peace exactly, but something close. The calm that comes when the storm has done its work and the air feels clean again. As he reached the top of a hill overlooking the city, he paused and let the view settle into him. The lights below shimmered like constellations caught in motion. Somewhere out there, millions of people were seeing small, impossible things, lights that blinked in rhythm, words that appeared without explanation, faint whispers asking, "Do you see it now?" He thought of Mia's last question. "Do you remember what I said?" He did. And more than that, he finally understood. Truth isn't about proof or punishment. It's about presence. It's the quiet force that refuses to disappear, the echo that reminds us that every lie depends on silence to survive. When silence breaks, even a whisper can become thunder. Daniel looked down at the glowing grid of streets and felt the pulse again, a heartbeat beneath concrete and data. Steady, alive. Somewhere the loop continued. But it wasn't a cage anymore. It was a rhythm. A cycle of remembering, forgetting, awakening, and beginning again. The wind rose softly, carrying the faint scent of rain and the hum of distant signals. He closed his eyes, letting it pass through him. When he opened them, the horizon shimmered, not with fire or destruction, but with light. Endless, imperfect, human light. And as the first drops of rain began to fall, he whispered the only question that mattered anymore. The one she'd left him with, the one the world now had to answer for itself. What will we do with the truth now that we can finally see it? The city exhaled. The hum steadied. And somewhere in the circuitry of the sky, a familiar voice, softer than static, brighter than memory, answered back, "Wake up." Then the world fell silent, alive in its stillness as though holding its breath for what came next.